probably, I think there's a box.
Good morning.
Yes. Yes. Hey. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, all right. I haven't found your little thing on it because I haven't until I was like, what's this? That's just in case there's a cyclone overnight, isn't it? Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. No, I had to change the sound. It's going to be better. Well, I think okay, since my girl
whose understanding shine forth from the sun, who teaches in 60 ways, nations of our nature. All creatures caught in the prison of sin. Those who striving from the proclamation of the Dharma arises from their stupor for delusion. Chains of our karma. Choose down suffering wherever it's brought. I entreat you, princely bodies and dogs. Who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning, O Manjushya, loving one with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness and close the mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdoms, deriving insight into the Buddha's words and the text that explain them.
Sanji Chadam Soji Chalala Chancho Badu Dani Kapsu Daki Chishi Gibe Tonangi Dola Benchi Sanji Ruparashu Sanji Chadam Soji Chalala Chancho Badu Dani Kapsu Daki Chishi Gibe Tonangi Dola Benchi Sanji Ruparashu Sanji Chadam Soji Chalala Chancho Badu Dani Kapsu Daki Chishi Gibe Tonangi Dola Benchi Sanji Ruparashu Kangi Tuzi Nizonde Tawa Kamche Pambi Chere Tambi Chun Denzi Padu Tenga Chanze Lo Good morning, everyone.
Is that straight? Is the image straight or is it? Okay, cool. Lama Sangela Chödeshi Lama Vedunde Puriche Bolama Lama Namla Chöva.
Sanji Tembitor means Tembitor Sumber Temba Some Super Temperature and Sumber Temple Lepertan Sumber Some Turing source.
We've finished looking at the first power of the 4 powers. So we've covered the power of interest or esteem. Let's look at the second one, which is the power of steadfastness or the power of stability. First off, looking at the outline. The power of stability is divided into 2 main points: stable perseverance and having undertake enjoys perseverance, stabilizing its engagement. When we begin with stable perseverance, again, there are 2 points to that section, examining it well and undertaking it, and the disadvantages of discarding it after one has undertaken it.
그래서 다 담보 레벨 다운 좀 봐서 레벨 다운 좀 있는데 다 차와칸다 칸 좀 봐야 아니 니야 다또 기위 차와 수고라서 로 기위 차와 칸다 칸 아니 지혜는 얘는 딱지 레벨 지지 아니 차와 좀 거야 그때 기시버리스 또 디순고레스
When the first point comes under the heading of examining well and undertaking it, it refers to whatever virtuous activity we're going to undertake. So you initiate a certain virtuous activity. It's important from the very get-go, which means before you undertake that virtuous action, that you inspect it well, that you examine it well. Only once you have given it a good consideration, then you should undertake it.
대다되게 균진 지당 원이 된 거라서 이내는 도디로 시바나 저기 개월 차와 좀니 차와디 탈친 거라서 소디 차와 탈치만 차와지 탈 마신 바이나 아니 개위 차와디 다 고든디 조투고요 말아서 당한 좀 고추 양 디샤 양 셴바지 고추 양 디샤 양 셴바지 고추 양 디샤 또 무슨 조샤바이나스 아니 간섬지려야 아니 공시 담아서 독자 차지 아니 강양 차와 강양 탈큐 못하고지 무슨 나오는 차에 니가 그랬어 무슨 됐자마자 깨와 치만 넣으면 디 공비기 쉬우지 아니 차와 갈점 바이는 탈큐 맞으면서 차를 니가 빼친 거여서 한번이 내버렸다 수수 투사의 말이 딱지 야구 친 통이 씹어지 아니 고정 거랬어 그까지 디송도 왔어
It's an important point because when we take up a certain virtuous activity, we want to bring it to its finality, to culminate it. Otherwise, if we take up a certain virtuous activity, but we don't follow it through up until its culmination, we will not be accomplishing the purpose, the great purpose and need of such virtuous activity. But even more so, when we think of developing developing negative habits of taking up virtuous activities, then halfway through changing your mind and doing something else, starting another virtuous activity without finishing the first one. Then again, halfway through, you encounter another virtuous activity. So you set up what you've done before and you start a new one without finishing it off. You create bad habits in this life. You don't not only have ramifications over this life, but also it will carry on to your future lifetimes, developing bad habits of taking up things and not being able to finish them. So before taking up such virtuous activities, we then need to examine them to see whether we are capable of performing such virtuous activities.
나디 조디 좀든지 송랑리야 콩두고요라서 도지견생 초가세디 아니 도지 세리스 디나로야 칼송스 잠는 나게 공부차스 잠니 비리야 아니 자와든 고점 같이 니 투그리 산비기 뽑아도 되는 돈 제고 그랬어 감비 잠는 나게 공시는 나게디 남중한 조직 아니 미문이 나도 여기 나게디 많이 봐 아니 뽑아 라 나리에 티치투기 디바이어 니 제고 산비기 니 탈기고 산비 같이 뽑아 담제 든지려야 아니 나게스 라고 여서레스라
Sorry, just a second. So as it says in the last two lines of verse 46, having undertaken through the procedure of Vajradvaja, I should cultivate pride, which means that, as it is stated in this text, right from the beginning, when you undertake virtuous activity, you should meditate on pride. This is to say, you should have self-confidence, meditate on your self-confidence in order to ensure that you will bring this action into culmination. So you think that from the very beginning, when you initiate such an action, you think, I will carry on this action and bring it to its finality. It's important to generate your self-confidence in this way.
I'm just wondering about virtuous activity is such a broad, can mean many things. Can mean many things. So I'm just wondering, does it mean like taking on different commitments, as in sadhanas, or does it mean like only put 8 water bowls on your altar instead of 80 water bowls on your altar, or like what are we talking about?
Is it big or small, right?
Yeah, well, it's you go through times in your life when maybe you could manage 80 water bowls a day. Other times you might only be able to manage 8, and you might even have times where you can't manage any. I mean, does that mean you shouldn't put any up because you can't consistently commit? And also, like practices and stuff like that. Like, could you please expand on virtuous activity, what we really should consider not taking and what we can do when we have the time and are capable of doing it.
I wonder if people at home have heard that question. Do I need to repeat it?
I could hear it.
All right, please repeat. So the question is, what exactly is included within virtuous activity, or rather than what are we talking about, in the sense that are we talking about, for example, commitments, committing to recite a certain sadhana, or, for example, we go through different periods in our life in which we might take up certain practices. So Deshana said that it might be that for a certain period in your life, you're able to do every day 80 water bowl offerings, whereas in another period, you're only able to do 8. So then, considering whether you're able to take up certain virtuous practice and bring it into its finality, I was speaking about for the rest of our life. I was speaking for a certain duration, because if you don't take into consideration that we do go through different periods in our life, and we might have, some periods of our life, ability to do certain things would be not as great as other periods of our life, then doesn't mean that we shouldn't make any commitments at all if we're unable to do it, lavishly or extensively. Dila gewa gijawa se di dila kwa kandechi lengo wure pena di wanchi shuwa ina dombachi shuwa ina yan sanzan di döbegi kenenchi ligerwa dubda dendechi dende kenenchi ligerwa chesan gewa jawa daganala jagogrwe kenendi je tomato daganala jagogrwe yamena samsam penadi samsam nimatakbar yancha tsar gepchu pyuchugire 근데 캐넌치 제와 이나로와 패시 미츠 간서데네 제투기 말에 갑갑라얀 게마토 퓨투기 말레스 세상 마초 미츠라 드로아덴데 드로기르사 할람 캐넌 제미 투바덴데 차기 년가도와 내가 제투기 말레스 미츠 간서다가란데 차시 차와덴데 패시 제투기 말레사네 페시 타말라 켈렌 카겜 마샤 차기냐가 두스된다.
그때는 기위 차원 상마야. 기위 차원 디키랑 고좀 슈기 고머세 기위 차원 요마로스. 갑디 기위 차원 상마가 코야레스. 라 안창 기타기레다 안 수수수 ngale ye chagre sam susu ma shumchukchi susu la ya niba ye bat nimeki samnyu ton ta nimeju sebaina 먼저 kaya mutubaji chagras kab di sungmudas khari in niba yoba ay nganzu chi kaze somanaji mi lu lambati ani chi mai ngane ma thembi chi dunga nyon samayimba mi lu ti ani thanda damage le yan rogo ya mi lu den de le niba chabaji yoba di sambi thoni ani susule niba yoba ti munzen cheni chawa kharan jubayna ya ani shukki matu khan yo mares Nese kansala Himalaya yonju sa geç tamba le hab shuras sound chik tambayna ro ani ta sound chinju tambayna ben yogda saw telaya kama chuchong ni shitin tizu tanggo ya nima tagwa tinji sound ro ine di sound tangdan jiresas ingyu ani gewi cha chamalo le jaya resas domba chigo mayin ba on chigo mayin ba gewi cha tar 친구의 상관없는 제 이사です.
근데 tembe topsa di pena lodila ona dutumambu yösamne lodila daran keren chigins ta gemala tende
딘지그라.
gemala tagi chigins yandi tembe top daran gomne
딘지그라. 저 야지야라.
So Geshe said that first of all, rather than pointing out some virtuous activities or pointing at them and says that virtuous activities refer to this specific one, Geshe says that he refers to whatever virtuous activity we take up, whatever practice we take up, whatever virtue we cultivate, we should meditate on that sense of confidence in thinking that I will bring it to its finality. Also, with certain practices, since you mentioned water bowl offerings, well, making every day 80 water bowl offering might seem to be a lot, but actually it's not a big deal. In a sense that when you think of how long will it take you to do it, probably 10, 15 minutes, if you are going to make that commitment. So sometimes when we think of such activities, we put ourselves down or kind of we become discouraged. We shrink from the task and think that I don't think that I'll be able to do it. And if we, in that way, from the very beginning, put ourselves down and thinking that I don't think that I'm going to do it, we're setting ourselves to a point in which we're not going to be able to take any significant activity and bring it to its finality. So why wouldn't we be able to commit ourselves to do certain things and to stick with our plan? Geshe stuff, we have the ability to do it. Now also, with respect to going through different periods in our life, you can also make certain commitments for the durations for a certain duration. Like for example, you might think that for the following year, I'm going to do such and such. Later on, my situation might change. So at least for this period in time, this is what I'm going to do. So we take up certain commitments, we take up certain virtuous activities. It does not necessarily mean that we have to commit to do them exactly in that way for the rest of our life. It could be for a more limited period. But the idea is that when we take up such activities, we meditate on self-confidence that will ensure that we also finish the things that we've committed to do. So it's not only limited to the vows or recitations, sadhanas, and so forth. It's whatever virtuous activity we take up.
Geshe Geshe or di Kaimaras, Kaimara, the Kelenchi Motu Kaimaras, the yin by Inaya, Kelen Chen, Kakalia, Chawadi, Shagu on cigarettes, Kansanaku Keche Chong then. And it Yonchot Yatamba Pia the Keche, then be Chawa Chevayano, di Shana divorce, di Kelen the Chevalier Nissan. Saw in Drogmaris. That daily catch one jilly, 연습 사자탕 표현들이 개총한지라 했더니 디샤바이는 다 논로 거랬어. 니는 신고다스라.
And particularly when we consider our virtuous activities to be done not just for the sake of this life, but for the sake of future lives, and even more so for attaining the state of liberation and for attaining the state of enlightenment, whatever training in virtue we take up that is oriented towards attaining the state of liberation and the state of enlightenment, then even if we make that commitment to daily offer 100 wordable offerings, Geshe reckons that if you consider liberation and enlightenment, it's not too difficult. And of course, it doesn't mean to say that every once in a while a situation changes in which you have something more important than that coming up, and then you have to make amendments. In certain situations, you need to check whether, while you have made, let's say, a commitment to offer every day 100 wordable offerings, but then in a certain duration or one day, there's something more important that comes up. So Geshe reckons that it is legit to think that since there is something that is of greater purpose, then for the time being, I will take that up, even at the expense of other things. But then if we make that decision in choosing something that is less significant or less important, that's a problem. That's not the way to go, right? So we can make amendments as we go in considering things that for the time being are more important.
틸다 당한주기 비 단냠네 지원기게 도초 지고 많이 봤다 나기 아니 냠네야 딱 가우쇼 지워라서 이제 나기 냠네 조디 아니 상가 뮤베 드르슨 송여로스 진짜 아니 타와드 탐지기미 공부대야 뮤베 두고 여바이나 아니 연습 야타마 피야대 뮤바치 와이나로 야지 요레도 치친 유야치도 뮤바치나 단지고 말았어 the same thing 지소소 수고 맞아버데 디카베야 아니 메바시바나 피가 고쳐 그러스 답변나 빼디 타처랑 디 샤원자 디토라 빼잔 시고다스로
Quando di pedi casa di mebaji chewaina
연습 세 모랑 라면자 다텔 잔 셰데라 다 메바디 수수타 지 나살로 소고 수고 맞아 가면야 아니 연습 야타면 표현이 메바이하고 치와나 다가를 보시오리 싸움도스.
So then looking at the commentary to this section, it begins with an example that is taken from the sixth dedication of the Vajradvaja Sutra, which says, Lai Pu, just as the rising sun without being stopped by blindness or even uneven mountains illuminates the objects that are suitable, bodhisattvas who arise for the purpose of others ripen and liberate those suitable to be subdued without being stopped by the various faults of sentient beings. So it says having studied virtuous action through this ritual, one should meditate on the pride of bringing it to completion. So when you think again of what you set to accomplish, we set to accomplish the state of liberation and the state of enlightenment, which are great undertakings. And since they're great undertakings, then looking at what we do daily in order to accomplish that. If we decide, for example, as part of the things that we do to offer 100 water bottle offerings every day, Geshe feels that considering the result, it's not that difficult. But as we said before, and Geshe says that just is mentioning water bottle offerings just because this is a point, one of the examples that Dechana came up with. There are times in which, for example, you might be sick, or there might be a certain situation arising in which you will not really be able to do it. So then Geshe reckons that if you, with a stable mind, unwavering mind, you visualize and imagine that you are making those offerings, you can, with a mind that is undisturbed, with a mind that is full of faith, you think of making these offerings, Geshe reckons that even that could be in lieu of actually making those offerings.
dan do din amal ya kar song re islam din ma tang da ta phamu che phawa doji yan jing ding do yu mo le chu ba le pe na tha yi po ni ma cha wa ni mo dang je mi nyam ba so be ni be mo do ba wes ku yu no ha wa che ba tas 아 장주 선바 신기 된데 차바양 심진기 니바 또 김도치 외스키 도잖아 멤버도 저렇게 좀 시송비 저가이 게위 레짱 탈침을 집에 나길 공부 자오스
So this sutra quotation is referring to the last two lines in verse 46. Again, it says, like Pu is just as the rising sun without being stopped by blindness or uneven mountains, illuminates the objects that are suitable. Bodhisattvas who arise for the purpose of others, ripen and liberate those suitable to be subdued without being stopped by the various faults of sentient beings. Having started a virtuous action through this ritual, one should meditate on the pride of bringing it into completion.
니 당본 저와 땅니 짬모 양노 미점차 마점 빠니 초인기 짬는 도보 미자오
It says in verse 47, at the beginning, having examined the endowments, it should either undertake it. I should either undertake it or not undertake it. It is best not to undertake it, but once I've undertaken it, I should not withdraw.
다들이 디즈다 디즈다 세우려다 그러 이게 수수의 저와 로이 저의 토니 자와 장바이만 탈치 투서레 말에 토야 아니 성당치 제바친 개지 탈치 투사 말에 삼비기 로지야 바이나 아니 자와든 거 맞잖아 약슈리스 아 고점 세비 제가 아니 탈침을 지구로 했어 탈만 침을 제와는 다
Here Shantideva says that before initiating a certain practice, like for example a physical practice, you should examine that activity and ask yourself if you're able to do it or not. Can I bring it to completion or not? If you decide that you're incapable of bringing it to completion, it might be best not to take it from the very outset, not to do it. But if you decide that it is within your ability to bring it to completion, then once you have undertaken this activity, you should make sure that you stick with that practice till you bring it to its finality.
라 만주 로이 니바싱이 카리어스나디 가주 시기 콤바체나야 아니 콤바타메도 페이비기 기주 용대죠라스 디 톰 성단 거가서스 모든 안주 류의 성단이 까까레 땅아 나이지 지 지차게 류기도레 니 투마리 성선 디 성단바이나 아니 안주 차와 가인 쌈 얘기 아니 니바메바치
Sorry, I should have said that rather than thinking of just physical activities, here the commentary says that it refers to mental activities. So looking at the commentary, it says, before engaging in action, one needs to analyze with one's mind whether one has the capacity for this action. Which means that you should check with your mind whether you have the mental capacity to see this action or this practice to its finality. So the main practice that we do is with our mind. Otherwise, if we just think of our physical activities, and we think that, I don't think that I can do it because sometimes I get tired, sometimes I get sick, sometimes something will not fit for me comfortably, so therefore I don't think that I will be able to continue with this practice, the main type of training that we take is mental training. If we only focus on things that we can do physically, it might be that we'll decide that we're not going to be able to do anything whatsoever.
이제 당신이 주세요.
나.
Yeah.
야만은 담보
I
제와
guess, if it's mental activity as well, that it included our aspiration to attain liberation and enlightenment. And while we may say to ourselves, I don't believe I'm going to achieve that in this lifetime. So we're looking here at the capacity to achieve rather than achieve that in this life, but still having that as your mental activity.
So with respect to mental activity, Chuki is saying that we're speaking here about the capacity, for example, to attain the state of enlightenment in this, or the state of liberation in this life. Because sometimes we say that we're not going to be able to, or we're not going to accomplish it in this life, but still we have the ability to do it. Chazandi Jen Newman Nusa di la some Luton it in San Tango. Tadi se di la Nyelegi combans and Tarpa Yamana Tamchikimba Kopandi Jen Nuba den San Tango. In Natsoyan God de la Kalagirisina. Se de la Natso Chanchu Kopa Yama Tava Shit Togimares. So Kewa Mabochi go Gires and Chilagra. Kewa Dine Kewa Namala Yanka Denjo Kewa Lewaina. Ani Amutune Yamin Jegi Nubachi Yorwa. Chazan Sedila Chanchu Kopanchi Togi, Sedila Tabagopan Togins, La di Samlotangurve, Manangala Nuba Dito and Nuba years than Samlotangur.
And the Sedilla Togmari, the Chiladanji. Sedilla Chanju Combo Togmari, Chanju Combo Tola in Jimmy, and it killed Yungor said, Shetan Chigras.
Oh,
Right.
no.
The Shetan Chigtoni, Sitching Luchile, then Ningi Sidon Chilea, and it Chanju Combo Tugres, Suzuki, Zambata, Bejonia, Tumaina, Tugres Songas, right.
Well, we do express ourselves sometimes in a particular way in a certain context. So sometimes we say that since it is likely that we're not going to be able to accomplish the state of liberation and the state of enlightenment in this life, we need a succession of good rebirth, pleasant rebirths, so that we'll be able to continue our work in order to do it. So we say that in one context. But then we still say that we also can attain the state of enlightenment in one body, in one life, at this time of degeneration. So if we put it into practice, particularly in drawing from the states of mantra, we are going to be able to do it.
Then when the Kawa said that the Kawa Bedun Chigo Chonia, she in a lot of Kiajas. The D and a lot of Kialia, he tabjirendus. Ni Kiva Juni, Kalajako Sami, lot of Kivana, and Kivan D in a ya. The Kalajada, the Tundon shooters, they'll have a tonic and brought to Yagi. Lot of Legos, Rata.
We use methods in order to develop great determination in our practice. So, for example, we become determined to persist with a practice, to work hard, even if it takes us eons over eons. So we think, even if it's going to take me 1 year, eon after the next of hard work, I will still continue to do it. If you develop this type of determination, also you will have determination to work hard in your practice in this life, in considering that the duration of hard work in this life is rather short when you consider having to make effort into practice for eons to come.
Tinsanganzu Lelo Shevi Kabdulaya, Daniel Nibi Lelo di 베마서 두자레스라다 디 베드 방자 송이was 인자 아니 난주 제바치는 투무투살시온디 무투사디 디 칼스나 왠지 소소라야 네바 메바다 뒤져 메바다 딘디 마고 쇼치 균센 땅낭지 통 사무다니 아니 무투살이 기거라스 투사데 상당단 디 카레스라운디 세치 류치라야 제비 콤보토데니 기부담바 망고 쇼치엔자 콘넘바 가르침 터바레스 콘넘바 믹스 카리어스라나 믹스 좀바 템바데 마토비기 lunga yisam and nonzo the chiwa chikyanch mijigi any jubara kinza somba tena jana bezun chena and kunju toyona and nonzo the chibara tonguru lot of sambigi lot of the yabaina karina chetu gosares karina chetu gosares right.
And if we think that we're not going to be able to do it, we need to check whether we fall prey to laziness of discouragement, which is one of the most negative types of laziness that we have. This is an object of abandonment, laziness of discouragement. Sometimes when we think of certain virtuous practices and when we think whether we're capable of doing it or not, we might be thinking that I don't think that I can do it. I don't think that I have the time to do it. I should think that I have neither the time nor the capacity to do this practice. And we come up with reasons why we cannot do it, which are facsimiles of reasons. They're pseudo reasons. They're not correct reasons. When you think of great masters that were able to attain the state of enlightenment in one lifetime, based upon one body, why were they able to do it? They were able to do it because they were diligent, because they had joyous effort. It's not that they had a secret ingredient which we don't have. It's not that there was something in them that was vastly different to what we have. The difference is in terms of the degree of effort and diligence that they put into their spiritual training and then what we put into a spiritual training. So if we then develop effort and determination, we can think that just like they have done it, I also can accomplish that state. So Shannon is asking, in terms of examining virtuous activities, well, how about when it comes to practicing Tantra, which is kept secret until one has taken an initiation? One can't really examine it before taking a commitment for the rest of one's life. Tadila Tanzam Wangchi Shuai Narwa, that one Mashukola Yamne Karikara Cheguyome Shesh Shogi Marwa. Jesa one Shunaya Yamlen Karichiguyome Yamne Kellen Karichi, Yimin Pesha one Shunamato Haku Marwa. Since then the Chigi Yins like the Munich and Jen Numanu La Mashinaya one Sugarwa, they can achieve us.
That the theory that so the Gigi Gabu and Yaodoji Chang, the so QV, and Lama Givishinilaya, Yichetan, Teba Tembuchi Habaina, that to Tsugi, Nietao in Chimutugaji, that song marada, can take maras, legati, Zawin Chimatu, legacy can chegorsi, check Yagmaras. Tinza, Tindisiton in the chit 2 inch. Ngalaya Pento Yangich Nangiori Chit Tugris and lot of the Yovano Chitugores draw.
In the King of Tantras with Vajradhara, it was said that such practices were given or are given to those that have trust and faith in one's spiritual teacher. See, when you have trust and faith in your spiritual teacher, you also trust that they're going to give you something that is within your ability. They're not going to give you a practice that is not within your ability to do that. So when you have that trust and faith in your spiritual teacher and you are receiving empowerment from them, you think that, well, well, it is given to someone that can do the practice. I can do it.
그래 계란 가양 메시 거라야 인지미 다다란 계란 온 슈거스니 수제 요마로스 담보 코란 안주 되지 도모 남잔 들도 좋아하는 대박군기 초교도지 텔레야 주고를 송아 디슨 거라서 인자 도모 남잔이 쪼디 민주 찬성 양답이 따왔습니다. 직로야고 장치 아니 드니 베 템부다 피 오늘 잔이 지 샘레요 소요가 지 레바이노 아니 상가도지 되게 원시에 잡아낸다 아니 약슈 년가 총슈 디차고라서
And an empowerment is given not to someone that knows nothing, that has no knowledge whatsoever, to someone that might not be able to put it into practice, but an empowerment is given to someone that has trained the mind in the common paths. It is said, as it is said in the prerequisites for obtaining an empowerment, that an empowerment should be given. The gateway to the practice of the sacred tantra is receiving an empowerment, and the one that receives an empowerment is the one that has trained the mind in the common paths. That being the case, then an empowerment is given to someone that is capable of putting it into practice.
당한 기한 참을 놓고 지 견자도 무슨 림비치는 만주기 아니 소소 담보는 총재 잡자면서 아니 총깔에다 마사야로다 이마로 그래도 디니 계셔거서래서 만주피기야 지 람딘 시종기 산지 좀 되디 만주라야 람딘 칸 나와 이 시종기 패바이나 년가치요 마스 년가치 매우 마세 야차 야탐바 템 야르야 드레이 just 야탐바데스로.
So of course, if you jump off to something that you might not be able to do, it's likely that you will fall. That's what happens when, with people that sometimes take a leap or jump, they fall. But if you progress gradually through the teachings that the Buddha gave, and the teachings that the Buddha gave were given in a sequential way, there is no such danger of falling.
Tirida dinda danda nganzu tu da mutu sedi an zu loliya tyugures ra lo tom da nganzu tanda shiwa na jingi chawa zomya kichi shudi benang hinju chansa yanta be tawsum na jabaino hisum di lu toni chere ngag toni chere yig toni chere labaino yacha gen yatam be yig toni chere bas ra Lulaya Kadu Katabanaya, Lu Dungadi, Shinju Res Lavada, any Kasa. Deva Chung the Chaba, the Chimbi Deva Thomas said, Deva Chung di Lu Devatsangaya chargely, and same Kangasi with Tabla Mambina, Yumar Swan, Tiris Ra. In the same Chiajim, the Lu Kantachi Pigilaya, Yesan and Home Devainaya, same Tony, sometime Liberty. Nyamgu maros. Sudanchi nyamgu maros. Ra. Tinza and lo univa ti chawa zomi univa yoba di manzula univa yoba yacha yata maros. Ti yoba di ungun zimbi toni chawa de la shukwachi shuni and tar majima di bezu chiva na imagine ya tar chin tu goris. Dindi soundang goris ra.
Now when verse 46, in the commentary to verse 46, speak about investigating and examining whether we are capable of undertaking a certain activity. It refers to activities such as, for example, the development of, I should first of all say that it refers to checking whether mentally we're able to do them, rather than focusing on physically. The focus here is whether mentally we're able to take up those practices, such as, for example, the development of the determination to emerge from cyclic existence, the development of bodhicitta, the development of wrong view, which all of them are practices that we take up mentally, rather than those are practices that we take physically, the practices that we take mentally, right, with our mind. So that being the case, it might be that physically we might experience some situation in which our body is in pain or our body is experiencing some sense of strife, but then still mentally we are still capable of developing a mind. So the focus is not on the body but on the mind, whereas when we focus on physical well-being, wanting to avoid pain, it might be just like a verse that we have covered before that says that sentient beings, though wanting to be happy, they destroy the cause of their own happiness. Though wanting to avoid suffering, they run towards the cause of their own suffering. So that could occur if we, rather than focus on the mind, we focus on the body. But if you examine whether you're able to do a certain practice, and the consideration that you have is whether mentally you're capable of doing that practice, it might be that for the time being, your physical ability is somewhat limited, and yet mentally you're still capable of doing this practice.
데레다 니주 장소 야다베 따와서 냠레디니 가드 체나 지고라스 가드 체나 그러니까 내가 비 슈그를 가르치고 니는 냠도 상당 초라스 그냥 가마서 가도 있느냐 아니 니주 장소 야다베 따와서야 로종 체초라스 타는 상줄 주 가도 있느냐 로종 체초라스 야름지 딱 되고도스 한 데리송도 아스라 진짜 다 진행지 번 제투고라스라 다 신들 맹인지와는 카 샴바지는 샤데만 다 고마점의 야가스 소냐 디인서라스라 그냥 진대요 말았어 야고 제대면서 하는 고마점의 야슈레스.
So now when you think about this instruction here in relation to the three principal aspects, the determination to live cyclic existence, bodhicitta, and the correct view, we should always put them into practice. If you're having your food, you can do it with the determination to live cyclic existence with bodhicitta and with the correct view. Izona says not only that, but even as far as when you go to the loo, you can do that still with continuing to cultivate the three principal aspects of the path. So we can do that. Whereas if you don't wish to do that, you come up with reasons why you cannot do it. So here Shantideva says, if you don't want to do it, it's better that you don't start doing it from the outset. Now, if you feel that you don't want to do it, then you come up with reasons why you cannot do it. Just don't start it to begin with.
제와드나노야 자와는 준비 당보 랑기 루인 조와 니바이메 레버 타는 니나 잠바차오 야나 문이나 무잠바차오 마잠바니 자 문이나 마잠바니 초인기 삼는 탈마치바 텔레도 무샤오.
The commentary says, before engaging in an action, one needs to analyze with one's mind whether or not one has the capacity for this action. If one is able, then one starts the action. If one is not able, then one does not. To not start the action is supreme, but once one has started, then one should not stop until it is completed.
데레다 먼저 뇌 문이 가게 단지시대가 나신기 아니 지금 문일산 수상도단 뒤쯤 메서 상당이 아니 첸디기 자와다 대양 지금 유단가기 자와야 아니 상도단 다 지금 뒤쯤에 봐 근데 그냥 상당 거 딘디지 담바이나 그냥기 이거 말했어 들까 아니 내가 샤스는 이야기를 했어 뒤야지 야담 인사했어.
When we examine whether we have the ability to take up a certain virtuous activity, and we give it a sense of consideration, and we decide that we cannot undertake this activity, we often think about whether we're able to do it in this life, whether certain activities in this that belong to this lifetime only, or affairs of this lifetime only, would prohibit us or would prevent us from engaging in virtuous activities. So in examining, this is sometimes what we come across. We come across those reasoning that in which we think that in this life I will not find the time or cannot make the time, or that there are other affairs of this life that would prevent me from doing that. So we should give it consideration and look at our arguments. If we find genuine reasons why we cannot undertake such activities, as Shantideva says here, it's best to not undertake them if you think that you're incapable of doing them.
Penata dombe choro jimbana ani sodar ki domba re chanju simbe domba re sanga ki domba and di pi chi ta song ni na mani utale sang dan ni so ni sa mar sang din jeba na kran domba di ani go mazam ne ya kanzna go chang bai na domba ko thogo mares ani di chome ki chasa
Correct of the money.
domba dingi ben sodar domba ro ngi me je kanza song tu sa mar dai ne lengi sam bai na
Zara.
domba thogo mares dil mazam ne ya gros.
So, for example, taking vows and guarding our vows, the Pratimoksha vow, or the Bodhisattva vow, or the Tantric vow. If we take a vow, we need to guard it. So you take a vow only once you think that I will guard it for the rest of my life. If you think, for example, I'm going to take upon myself a Pratimoksha vow, I don't think that I'll be able to guard it for the rest of my life. I don't think that I can do it, but I'm going to take the vow anyway. You are likely to not attain the vow. The vow is likely not to be attained if right when you begin the action, you think that I don't think that I would be able to guard it.
Ani ba zamne thori nimik career Islam ni zamne thori niba la chi chenas sabat also kewa shendo te komshi digda dungan pewal gyu janda jebi tüjan mengyu te rumigurs.
Let's look at the next verse that comes under the heading of if you undertake a certain virtuous activity and then you cast this aside, you stop doing it, it is faulty, it is a fault. Let's look at verse 48. It says, I will familiarize with that in other rebirths, and negativities and sufferings will increase. Also, others and the time of the result will be inferior and will not be accomplished.
Nama di cheba gyundingi di cheba gyundingi kewa shendo thorbati komshi tamje nyambi kewi chendri digbata gyundingi devo kewi chibi devo di namingi devo devo samadje tenam di namin dongan pewa gyushi chi zambi chawa shenda le tengi kin devi tyuja ne memba gyundi tyuringo gorwata.
So the fault of giving up after having started begins with a query. What is the fault of stopping something one has started? The answer in verse 48, one will be habituated to it in other lives, and negativity and suffering will increase. One is diminished at other times, and the time of the result, one will not achieve. So in answering what is the fault of stopping something one has started, says through the concordant cause of having acted like this before, one will in other lives also be habituated to giving up. So in this section, Gyaltsen Dhamma follows through Shantideva's text in explaining the different types of results. So we do speak about result that is similar to the cause in terms of your behavior, in terms of your experience. We do speak about ripening results, environmental results, and so forth. So here Gyaltsen Dhamma explains some of them. So the concordant cause of having acted like this before, one will in other lives also be habituated to giving up. The action similar to the cause of a person that breaks a promise is that their negativity increases, and the ripening result is that their suffering increases. Further, one will be diminished later at different times when starting other actions or at the time of the result of this action, which has become greatly prolonged. The other actions one will also not achieve as well.
Taniba zamni shubat temba chebala ni duty temba tang sosor temba o tambo duty temba ni leda ni bati sumbo tala magichas.
Then looking at the next section, having undertaken Joy's perseverance, stabilizing its engagement, we're going to begin with a brief presentation, and then we're going to look at explaining each individually. First off, the brief explanation in the first 2 lines of verse 49 read, sorry. Apply pride to the 3, action, afflictions, and ability.
That Delia Chedawani Tumudu again number soon surach, leading again, living again. Any human again similarly. On the reaching was at that Devano Chawa della Shuni, Chavi, Leta, Panshi, Nimuta, Judo Chibi, Nibati, Sombo Tala, Mashimshin, to Kiwi, Nargir Chawas.
Here it says, Shantideva says that we should apply pride to 3 things, to the affliction, to the action, to afflictions, and ability. Explaining the context of applying pride to the 3 is in this way. Practice pride in the 3, which counteracts discouragement and increases strength. Pride in the action after having commenced the action. Pride in afflictions being an object of abandonment, and pride in the ability to engage in abandon.
That you all mean. Even Susu Shebal assumes, then again number Susu Shebal assume, legging I get down, Nibble and I get chawata, New Mol and I get chaw, Tambo legging I get assume, leggy, I get Boswata, Tederchi between Zenta, Shangy maybe Nelaya, couldn't Zimbi, I get chaw, I get chawas.
So in explaining individually the types of pride that we take in order to stabilize the engagement, having undertaken activities with joyous effort, we're first of all going to look at pride of karma, pride in our activities, then being proud of one's capacity, and finally being proud of the affliction. We'll begin with pride of karma or actions. There are 3 parts to it: identifying the pride of karma, the reasons why one acts in that way, and finally being proud of assuming the burden of others of inferior karma.
Tambo legging again was only, Dani Chibi Chawashi, then the legging again is.
So verse 50 says, verse 50, sorry, the last 2 lines in verse 49 says, thinking I alone should do it is the pride of action.
She gives mama. There is that lay said the Namjung on the should lay said the Chawarawa, Chawadi Nietzsche took him some of the layer and Chaving I guess and I some legging I guess said the 2 did changes and big lot of the and legging I guess was the Chagdos round the shinky 10 times ago and Narang chi to a chicken yamika lot of joros draw.
So the pride of action here is developing the determination in when we think that I alone will do that action, which is a type of pride in action, pride in karma that bodhisattvas develop. After all, when we develop bodhicitta, when bodhicitta is developed, bodhisattvas think, I will accomplish the welfare of sentient beings. I will accomplish the welfare of myself and others. I will do it. So this is the type of pride that we take in such actions.
Tether chip Gunsen Carres. Sim Jin Shingi Chavala Medeva Rangi Drover Chati Zavali. New on Jigden di Randu Drover Minibase. Tanda part to touch new biggie, Shaman the Sony, 아니 지금 장나 장원매가 뉴비 샤원 소미 직된 디기 카르촌스디 젠덴 파제네 람데야 드문네바치 다 뉴모비 가지기 돈 비치어라스 인자 드라베 다타 미니디스 대비 다기 아니 심자 탐지기 돼 아니 코딜레네 드라바이나 람데 마스 젠데 드르투바치 용고연자 아니 레징하게 친구에 빈젠디 디차고레스
근데 직접적인
직진량 불러서 건다. 유무하면 직된데 람들 들어오는
오케이.
그러다가 민 때문에 대처was.
So seeing that others could do that action as well, one thing, I shall do this alone. The strength of mind one generates here is pride in action. Now the reason for practicing now is explained in the next verse, in saying these worldly beings with no control due to afflictions cannot achieve their own purpose. Hence my greatest cannot act like this, and therefore one needs to do this. So when we reflect upon certain activities, we think that while it is possible that others have the potential to accomplish those actions, still, because of their afflictions, they're incapable of doing it now because of anger, attachment, and so forth. These sentient beings are incapable of doing it now. So therefore, I alone will do it for their sake, for my sake as well as for their sake. So these worldly beings with no control due to the afflictions cannot achieve their own purpose. Hence, my greatest cannot act like oneself, and therefore one needs to do this.
제가 뉴모비 오메고 유인 직대만디 람데 여주로 미니비스 드라베 다타 젠든 데케월트 미니디 대달라 때장 템바메디 대비 다기 진지 된차원데 탐지 차 냠바 이 나기 체디 계산 시슈레서스라
It says in the commentary, one needs to achieve the works of sentient beings by oneself, independently from others, because these worldly beings, which have no control due to their afflictions, cannot achieve even their own purpose. Hence, my greatest cannot strive in virtue for the purpose of others like one can. And even if one were to rely on them, it would be useless. Therefore, think, I have to do the actions for the benefit of others by myself. It is beneficial, it is profitable for oneself to think in this way, don't you think?
Sumba shengi membi lela yang kulzimbi ngarye chawanis. Shenda membi lechema da chan dani chan chidarduk ngarye kin mijete dala ngarye mebi chops.
So we looked at identifying the pride of karma, the reason why one acts in this way. Let's look at being proud of assuming the burden of others of inferior karma in verse 51, which reads, if others are doing inferior work, why do I sit around? I do not perform it out of pride. It would be best for me to have no pride.
Terida, just that to the all you that Shayans Shindiso maybe lechena Gola Simjin Kurchi Kewa Dani Gan Tower Chidan do the nature was subdivision of Kanji Nanjuta Tamaba Sigura and Kimber Pomola Soba and Cindy Togutan Song Chetu Touch and it when Shingali Soba Ra and it Shogin Gonda Parduta and she said that some Chetu Redania Kalish Gavchin Drovioras. Hindi lette vaina ani chi pi ani tevachim chugula shu chanju semi dombal len sangi meji ani simje thamji gi them khodi kengi ji any condition relation de rigiri. So in the rigmara Samsung any Karsota or Dindigi Samtango race.
It says, when others engage in inferior actions such as field work, how can one who has accepted to carry the great burden of sentient beings on one's head remain with leisure? One should work. So when it says when others engage in inferior actions, it doesn't the Tibetan language doesn't refer to actions that are inferior by nature. It's more like when you think of lesser activities, such as, for example, working in fields and so forth, which require a lot of hard work, sometimes from morning to evening, but still are oriented towards whatever you get out of that from this life. So when you see others engage in those activities that are limited to this lifetime only, which do require so much effort, how come one becomes quite relaxed about the attainment of the state of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings? Since we have taken the burden, the responsibility to attain the state of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, and that is much greater than those activities that are oriented towards this lifetime only, then in no way we should be casual about them or be relaxed. We should make effort in accomplishing them.
The Nagin Majid Dala Nagin chose Nagidi New Nagilia, Jayareshas. Kongi and the Najason de Nagil the mean Tabatamato, Tangoma, and lot of down to Zolia Jalbudas. And the D Nagi Kin Michid Dala Nagi never chose it, Newman Nagilishan, New Nagi Miches, Dala New Nagi Mena, the Chok Yashudinza, D Gonaya, D Paya, Telia Bezunchi Goichik.
When this verse says, I do not performing out of pride, it would be best for me to have no pride. This is pride in the afflictions. It is referring to pride in the afflictions which we're yet to cover, but you can say that in this point in time, we're already saying that one should not have afflicted pride. One should not have pride that is in affliction. One should think that I will be free from these afflictions and I will perform those actions. So in that sense, you develop this determination to perform this action, but you should do it without afflicted pride.
I mean, but it's important, like the example given on working in the fields for food is something that as ordained people we need. We need somebody to do that. So instead of, wouldn't gratitude be a more appropriate attitude for the work that lay people do to help society roll, rock and roll too?
So when you say that, wouldn't it rather be gratitude, instead of what?
Pride.
Instead of pride.
Yes, that's what they're really talking about, showing gratitude rather than a pride thinking, oh, aren't I good practicing, a more noble activity. Think, I'm grateful that they are working in worldly activities so I can practice.
All right, so Dechana is saying that wouldn't here an attitude of gratitude towards those who do field work and so forth, without which we're not going to be able to survive in this life, wouldn't be an attitude of gratitude be better than having that sense of pride in thinking that I'm performing that great activity, that noble activity? Wouldn't that gratitude be better? Dila member lesser dila cap dila shingle la sofa dende chik jashigadwa. Tangatsu pena chawa tani na shinle machewa ina ngatsu de tugi marwa. So kala tan dila sofa ragi marwa. Chinsan konso mission ba lega denda chewa ina. Konsola kajin dende gongo gurwa. Konso kajin gongo gure. Chinsan kap dila legi ngage se di gombe tsabla nga di lega chi lega di dinde nga chanju ko pan dundun yegi yus dinde kitchen boy yins lega dinde kitchen boy res dinde ngage chagi chi taw kasa di samlo sto de tsabla shen la kajin go go ina yaga marges
tanda digi maybe less di se di zang che chawa di se di zang che di imbanza chawa di mema shagoles kewa ni kewa gyun tawa de tamche kimi komba che chawa jimbana chawa di keche da chawa yakbule yang monzi chi kabra was 어도 군주 내가 지금 군주 멤비 내 지금 군주 내가 지금 통조 친구다 딘디라고 말했어.
Well, first of Geshe says that when here the text refers to inferior activities or lesser activities, it refers to activities that are oriented towards this lifetime only. Then in comparison with this type of actions, you have actions which are focused not on this lifetime only, but on a succession of lifetimes that will end up in the state of liberation or the state of enlightenment. So in a relative way, these which are more far-sighted or long-term activities are higher than those that focus on this lifetime only. So having said that, in no way we kind of think that we are totally above those activities that belong to this lifetime only. We don't look down on them, we don't belittle them, we don't see something negative in them. It's more like we just say that in comparison with those activities which are limited to this lifetime only, there are other activities that are more far-reaching.
아니 당한저 저와다 아니기 신가 말에 들맞는 칼라라고 말에 세조로서 이 성도들도 텐듀 저와다 아니기 성도를 봤어. 운기 저와다 아니 쪽에 배틀을 다치 nenjulu zhenbayiza tawa tamji kimi komo togo ras tandi tyugi ngada gi tawa da ane tsogi chi penjo jimena tanga kanga tigre samso da ni chi machina mi ngochi maso na kanga tigre samde di tendugi onzo ta ni ingmanga dugi ane tawa da ane gi samu tanga je mado di 인지직 상도 마담에 있는 휴직 경험을 해야지. 계속 야담아 이어 말했어. 이는 양 깎아야지 칼라를 깡가 채스 어딘지 연구했어. 이네 디 동네 치고다서 뭐지 지는 디 동네 치지. 이니마지 칼라 말하는 개 가리어리. 엔베 론로야. 엔피게 괜히나 괜히 좀 사된 가지고 성성 상호지 키워내라.
네, 그런데 라요 말에 그런 칼라가 있는데 다자인 차와다 아니 나가서 칸사바디 말에 나서 칸라바디 칸사바디 생기 속으로 생기 페나 신레 신레 콘소지마 채와이 나가서 나서라 칼라라기 말와 최선 콘소 카딘 공고 그 말베스
오케이 거단 넣으셨어요 지금 열다 되겠다지
So then Geshe also added something to it, but I think that probably misunderstood my translation. So he said that in misunderstanding my translation, which means that probably I did not translate it right. And then I corrected it now. So Geshe said, a time of old, during, for example, the time of the Buddha and also later on, when people become monastics, monks and nuns, they have relinquished everything in thinking that I will thereby set on the path that lead to the state of liberation and enlightenment, and having no consideration whatsoever to this life. Whereas nowadays, even when we become monks and nuns, we still have sometimes consideration of how we're going to get by in this life. We're going to think that, well, if I'm not going to have some money, there's no way that I'll be able to remain a monk or a nun. If I don't have some savings, or if I don't have something to get by, there is no way that I'll be able to survive in this life. So nowadays the attitude is different to the attitude that monks and nuns used to have before. So then So Geshe, that your question was slightly different, kind of rather than thinking of oneself, then sometimes we think that if others do not provide me with what I need, like food and so forth, if others do not do work in the field and so forth and produce the food that I eat, anyway, I will not be able to survive. So we need to meditate on their kindness in supporting me.
The Gadita, Chitani, Chanju, Sem, Ninji, Zawadi, Gundamanga, Ra, and the song that cutting Gongos, Ra, Kanji Ton, the cutting Gongos, in a cutting is Chava Chechon, King Loga Chigodas, Ra.
Now, yeah, you can meditate on the kindness of others, certainly. When others provide you with certain things, you can meditate on the kindness of others. And it is also something that you find, for example, in the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions for developing bodhicitta. So you meditate on the kindness of others, but still, even if you meditate on the kindness of others, you can still then have a comparative approach to certain activities and consider which activities are greater and which activities are lesser. Reading through the commentary of this verse, it says, when others engage in inferior actions such as field work, how can one who is accepted to carry the great burden of sentient beings on one's head remain with leisure? One should work. When others engage in inferior work, one may think, I should act with pride and engage in pure actions. Do not engage in these actions with such pride, as it is supreme not to have afflicted pride. It should be abandoned because through it one will go to the lower realms. Thank you. Let's leave it here for now. Nyodo da lama sangye dogyo ne do chikama lupa de sala go shu chanchu sancho rinpo mage pama kegyo chi keba nyampa me pa gone gondo pewa shu Rivawe kowe shinkangye vedanda wa walu jowe ne chile sewa benzi gyatso shape site badu tengyo chi sonju jupe ram sheshe shote kamse chasa benzi gyatso sowa depso shendu lundu Jam yun gawe, ten zin gape we kuso po, cho sun ko we me mon tu, da so tu shi, sha ten shu.